Hi, everybody, and welcome to McNulty's Book Corral. I'm your host, Thomas McNulty, and today I'm smelling gun smoke, all right? Now, that always happens when I have a stack of old musty paperbacks with me, and today's one of those days. So I pulled out the old Colt, thought I'd check that out. It's a beautiful thing to have a Colt. Kind of reminds me of something about crossing the Mississippi. Things like that. All right. So, anyways, by the way, I'm a guns unloaded. This is a Colt. This is one of many of my Colts, and my wife and I do participate in cowboy action shooting, and so I pulled out the old Colt today because today we're talking about two Western series that I really like. The Buchanan series by Jonas Ward, who was really William Ard, and the Walt Slade series by Bradford Scott. Let's talk about Buchanan first. Now, the Buchanan series is of interest to me because years ago I saw a film with Randolph Scott called Buchanan Rides Alone. I think it was a 1958 film, one of his last films. He had two after that, and he was done. In the Buchanan film with Randolph, I'm a Randolph Scott fan. So I was interested in the character from the film. This goes way back, all right? And so I would start looking up the books and collecting them when I found them. Now, I'm the type of collector that loves to haunt flea markets and antique shops, which a lot of people used to go to secondhand bookstores. And there are still some secondhand bookstores out there, not as many as there used to be. So I would go to flea markets and antique shops, and that's where I picked up the bulk of my Western paperback collection. Flea markets are a great resource for stuff like One Man Massacre by Jonas Ward, a Buchanan novel. Tom Buchanan, interesting guy. Great cover artwork, by the way, on some of these. I'm not going to show them all to you, just to show you a few. So William Ard, who was really Jonas Ward, I think he wrote the first five. And then Brian Garfield and William Cox wrote the rest. I think Robert Silverberg had a hand in one of them. I think Robert Silverberg allegedly had a hand in Buchanan on the Prod, the great science fiction writer Robert Silverberg. That's what I read on the internet. I think that's fascinating. So, great book, of course. So, I started reading the Buchanan novels and collecting them. There's dozens, and then they ran through the 60s, 50s, and 60s. The first Buchanan novel was, the name is Buchanan, which was 1956. Now, by comparison, the Walt Slade series by Bradford Scott also appeared that same year. So, 1956 seems to have been a watershed year for paperback Westerns. The 1950s by themselves is the best decade for Westerns. I mean, an incredible amount of fantastic Western films were created and released during the 1950s. So I started reading the Buchanan novels, and, there's so many of them. The name's Buchanan, Buchanan's Revenge, One Man Massacre, Buchanan's Big Showdown. Kind of a haunting. Now, Buchanan, his name is Tom Buchanan. He's a loner, and he's a traditional tough guy Westerner. The action is what you would expect from a Western, but the books were really well written. Buchanan's Gamble, here's another one. Great cover art. And this went on for years and years. Buchanan's Manhunt. Actually, I've got doubles. I've talked about that before. When you're a collector, you end up with doubles. I have triplicates on some of this stuff. Buchanan's Gun. So there's tons of Buchanan novels out there. So I'm recommending, for you Western fans, if you haven't read one of the Jonas Ward Buchanan books, find the Buchanan books. They're out there, and they're a lot of fun to read. We'll talk in a minute about the elements that I enjoy. I got this Colt hanging here. I gotta go to the target range and blast off some lead. All right. So that leads us to Bradford Scott, Walt Slade. This series also appeared about the same time and ran for years. Now, Bradford Scott was really Leslie Scott. And again, this series premiered in the 1950s, 1956, and it ran through the 60s. I think it ran even after Bradford Scott stopped writing them. It ran for years. Now, unlike the Buchanan series, which the first 5 were written by William Ard, the rest were written by other writers. The Bradford Scott wrote most of these books. He wrote at least 2 dozen before it was taken over by another writer or writers. Take a look at the covers on some of these. I love the style of these paperbacks. So Walt Slade is a character similar to Tom Buchanan, and it's the Walt Slade series from Bradford Scott. I love look at this one. I just love the cover artwork on these old Western paperbacks. Wouldn't you love to own some of that? Check this one out. I love this as one of my favorites. What a great cover. Let's see if you can get it so that you don't have the glare from the light on there. Look at that tough guy there leaning against the bar. So these books are equally as fun to read as the Buchanan novels. So between the two, I'm recommending, the Buchanan novels and the Bradford Scott Walt Slade character. And I love the titles, Gun Justice, Ambush Trail, Valley of Hunted Men. How about this? Death in the Saddle. So Death calls the turn. Could the Westerns be any more fun than this? I don't think so. I really don't. Doom Patrol, or Doom Trail, I'm sorry. Doom Trail. Look at that, another great cover on that. I love that. And look at the back. Gold Dust and Blood. Is that fantastic or what? The Rattlesnake Bandit. Look at this. So, I have a stack of this stuff here. So between Buchanan and Walt Slade, Trails of Gun and Gold, I really think that you would enjoy these. If you haven't read them, check them out. Now, the elements that make these books fun to read, let's talk about that. With Buchanan, he's a bit of a loner, and that's a traditional trope for the Western, the loner. The stranger rides into town, what happens next? There couldn't be a simpler plot device. But the books were well written. The action is exquisitely rendered at times, very well written, even though the Buchanan series had multiple writers on it. It remains high level, high quality writing, and I'm quite fond of them. And with Bradford Scott, it was a guy like Zane Grey who loved the landscape. So you get these kind of poetic descriptions about the landscape out there with the Bradford Scott Walt Slade novels. They're fun as well. Good characterization. Walt Slade is not quite the loner that Buchanan is, but another interesting character. So again, with these books, you get strong characterization. You get the traditional Western elements, generally about the 1880s era, 1870s, 1880s, and a lot of entertainment. As I've mentioned before, the Western is America's greatest genre. It's our genre. It exemplifies the American experience. And when it comes to writing Westerns, there's really no limitation to what you can do with the plots. They may be cliches, but they may be cliches, but they're cliches that you can change up and you can make it fresh again. The best writers do this. The good writers do this. Peter Brandvold would be an example who can take a typical cliched plot and turn it into the most riveting and exciting thing you've ever seen. And there are many other writers. This video series does cover some of them. But for today, I was smelling Gunsmoke today. I had to get the old Colt out, and start looking at some old Walt Slade and Buchanan paperbacks from the past. I smell the dust. I smell the trail dust. I can hear the clip-clop of the horse's hooves, as Zane Grey once so eloquently wrote, on the dusty trail. So just a brief little, remind. Look at all this stuff I've got. I mean, you can't have any more fun than this. And I love the hunt. I love to hunt books down. I could go on eBay and find this and order it all today with a credit card, but that kind of takes the fun out of it. I like to hit the dusty trail. So saddle up with your Colt, pull out your Colts, go to a target range, shoot. Join Cowboy Action Shooting. Get some good old paperbacks to read. The Western. It's never gonna die. All right, as always, thank you for checking in, and stay well, stay happy. Feed your brain and read a book. See you on the dusty trail.